There are moments in life when you realize you are completely alone in this world. For Elena Reyes, that moment arrived on November 15th in a Manhattan law office, sitting in a leather chair that cost more than her monthly rent, listening to words that would shatter what remained of her heart. The Morrison and Associates building rose 42 floors above Midtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of cold efficiency that whispered of money most people would never touch. Elena had taken 2 subway transfers to get here, still wearing the faint smell of grease from her breakfast shift at Romano's Diner, her hands raw from scrubbing industrial kitchen equipment since 5 in the morning. She had tried to wash the smell away in the bathroom downstairs, splashing water on her face and smoothing down her secondhand dress, but some stains went deeper than soap could reach. The conference room stretched before her like a theater of judgment. Mahogany panels lined the walls, polished to such a high shine that Elena could see her own exhausted reflection staring back at her from multiple angles. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, each pendant probably worth more than everything she owned combined. The table could seat 20, but only 7 people occupied the space, and the arrangement made it clear who belonged and who was merely tolerated. Elena sat at the far end, as distant from the lawyer as geography would allow. Beside her, 7-year-old Lily clutched Mr. Patches, her threadbare stuffed rabbit, the stitching on his left ear coming loose for the 3rd time this month. Elena had bought him at a thrift store for 50 cents when Lily was 3, and somehow that rabbit had become the most precious thing her daughter owned. Lily's small fingers trembled against Elena's palm, squeezing tighter with each passing second. The child did not understand the legal terminology filling the room like poisoned air, but she could feel her mother's pain radiating outward like heat from a furnace that burned everything it touched. Across the massive oak table sat what remained of Elena's family, though the word family had long since lost any meaning that mattered. Derek Reyes occupied the seat closest to the lawyer, 35 years old and sharp as a blade in his $3,000 Armani suit. His Rolex caught the light with every subtle movement of his wrist, and his hair was slicked back with the kind of expensive product that cost more than Elena's grocery budget for a month. As a hedge fund director on Wall Street, Derek had mastered the art of looking at people like they were insects beneath his Italian leather shoes. His eyes carried the temperature of winter steel, and when they landed on Elena, they held nothing but contempt for the sister who had made all the wrong choices. Beside Derek sat Vanessa, 38, and dripping in jewelry that sparkled like captured starlight. Her diamond necklace alone could have paid Elena's rent for years. Her manicured nails, painted the deep red of expensive wine, tapped against the table in a rhythm of impatience and triumph. As an interior designer for Manhattan's elite, Vanessa had never hidden her disgust for Elena's Goodwill wardrobe and studio apartment in Queens. Her smile now was cruel and satisfied, the expression of someone who had already won and was simply waiting for the formalities to conclude. The lawyer, a man in his 60s with a voice as flat as an automated recording, cleared his throat and continued reading from the document that would determine Elena's fate. And to my grandson, Derek Reyes, I leave the Hampton estate, including the 5-bedroom oceanfront property and 2 acres of beachfront land, estimated value $2.3 million. Derek nodded slightly as if receiving his due tribute, his expression never changing from its mask of entitled satisfaction. To my granddaughter Vanessa Reyes Hamilton, I leave my art collection in the Brooklyn Heights brownstone. Total estimated value $3.7 million. Vanessa's fingers stilled their tapping, her smile widening into something victorious and cold. The list continued. A cousin in Florida received $50,000. Another relative in California inherited a collection of vintage automobiles. An aunt in Texas was awarded a ranch property. Even distant connections, people Elena barely remembered meeting at childhood holidays, were acknowledged with cash or assets or recognition of their existence within the family tree. Then came the words that would change everything. And to my granddaughter Elena Reyes, the lawyer's voice carried the slightest hesitation, as if he himself was uncomfortable with what came next. I leave nothing. Her choices have led her down a path I cannot support. I will not reward failure with inheritance. She chose to marry a man unsuitable for our family, refused the counsel of those who knew better, and must now bear the consequences of those decisions. Let this serve as a final lesson. Silence crashed through the room like a wave of ice water. Elena felt the impact of those words as physical force, as if someone had driven a fist into her chest and pushed all the air from her lungs. She had known her grandmother disapproved of her marriage to Miguel, had known the family considered her the black sheep who refused to follow their prescribed path. But hearing it spelled out in legal language, with finality and cruelty, transformed suspicion into a wound that cut all the way to bone. She did not cry. She had stopped having tears for this family years ago, had used them all up during countless nights alone after Miguel abandoned her and Lily without so much as a goodbye note. 3 years ago, she had awakened to find his side of the bed cold, their shared savings account emptied of the $2,000 she had scraped together over months of double shifts and no explanation beyond absence. Lily pressed closer, her small body trembling against Elena's side. The child could sense the emotional earthquake rippling through the room, even if she could not name its epicenter. Derek leaned back in his chair with casual arrogance, his posture communicating everything his words would only confirm. Well, that settles things then. Elena, if you need help, perhaps a small loan to get through the month, we can certainly discuss terms. The condescension dripped from every syllable like honey laced with poison. Interest rates for family would be quite reasonable. Vanessa laughed, the sound brittle and sharp as breaking glass. Do not be too harsh with her, Derek. Not everyone is born with the capacity for intelligent decision-making. Some people are simply less fortunate in matters of judgment. Elena stood, her legs unsteady beneath her, but her spine straight, with the kind of dignity that cannot be purchased or inherited. She took Lily's hand, feeling her daughter's fingers wrap around hers with the desperate trust of a child who believed her mother could protect her from anything. We do not need anything from you, we never have. The words were not entirely true, but they gave her strength to walk toward the elevator with her head held high. Behind her, Derek's voice carried one last barb. Pride is expensive, little sister. Let us know when you are ready to negotiate. The elevator doors opened like an escape route, and Elena guided Lily inside, pressing the button for the lobby with fingers that trembled only slightly. The doors began to close on the conference room and everyone in it. Then everything changed. Miss Reyes, wait, please wait. A woman's voice, urgent and breathless, cut through the closing gap. Elena instinctively pressed the button to hold the doors, and a figure rushed forward, heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor. The woman appeared to be in her 50s, with short gray hair cut in a sensible professional style, and a charcoal suit that spoke of competence rather than wealth. Behind wire-rimmed glasses, her eyes held something that looked almost like concern, a quality entirely absent from everyone else Elena had encountered in this building. I am Patricia Walsh. I represent another estate that concerns you. She extended a cream-colored envelope, Elena's name written across the front in elegant script that shook slightly, the handwriting of someone elderly but determined. This is from Margaret Holloway. She passed away 6 weeks ago and left specific instructions that this letter be delivered to you after your grandmother's will was read. The name floated somewhere in the depths of childhood memory, surfacing slowly like a bubble rising through dark water. Margaret Holloway. Maggie. Her grandmother Eleanor's older sister, though the two had stopped speaking decades before Elena was born. Elena remembered meeting her once, briefly, when she was 8 years old. A tall woman with silver hair and blue eyes so sharp they seemed to cut through pretense. The encounter had lasted perhaps an hour, and then Maggie had vanished back into whatever exile the family had imposed upon her. Elena took the envelope, feeling the weight of expensive paper against her calloused palms. Why would she leave anything for me? I barely knew her. Patricia Walsh's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy. Mrs. Holloway was a remarkable woman who kept her own counsel. She left detailed instructions, and those instructions were very specific about you. She glanced toward the conference room, where Derek and Vanessa were visible through the glass walls, gathering their things with the leisurely pace of victors. I suggest you read the letter somewhere private, and soon. The elevator doors closed, cutting off the view of the family that had just erased Elena from their legacy. In the lobby, Elena found a bench near the window, away from the security desk and the streams of expensive suits flowing through the revolving doors. Lily sat beside her, Mr. Patches clutched to her chest, watching her mother with the patient attention of a child who had learned that sometimes adults needed quiet moments. Elena opened the envelope carefully, sliding out a sheet of ivory paper covered in handwriting that matched the script on the front. The letters shook slightly, the marks of someone fighting against time and failing health. But every word was legible, deliberately formed by someone who wanted to be understood. My dearest Elena, we met only once when you were 8 years old. You probably do not remember me. I was your grandmother's older sister, though we stopped speaking 70 years ago over disagreements that now seem absurd in the face of eternity. I remember you, though. I remember how you sat quietly while the adults talked, your eyes taking in everything around you. I remember how you stroked my cat with a gentleness most children do not possess, how you asked me questions about the paintings on my walls while everyone else ignored them. You were 8 years old, and already I could see the person you would become. I followed your life from a distance after that day, through Christmas cards your mother sent before she passed, through newspaper clippings and photographs that found their way to me through channels I will explain later. I know about your marriage and its end. I know about your daughter and the sacrifices you make for her. I know about the jobs you work and the sleep you sacrifice and the dignity you maintain despite everything stacked against you. I know what your family did to you today. I know because they did the same to me 70 years ago. I married a man they considered unsuitable, a Jewish businessman named Benjamin, and for that transgression I was erased from the family. Cast out without a penny or a kind word, told I no longer existed in their eyes. But I built something beautiful anyway. I refused to let their rejection define me. And now, at the end of my life, I want to give you the same chance I fought for. The mansion at 417 Holloway Ridge Road in Silver Creek, New Hampshire is yours. The key is enclosed with this letter. Everything inside belongs to you now. There is something else you need to know, something your grandmother never told you about our family. You will understand when you find what I have left for you. Not because you are perfect, but because you survived. Just as I survived. Know that someone saw you, Elena. Someone knew you were worth more than they ever said. With all the love I was never allowed to give. Margaret Holloway, P.S. Be careful of Derek and Vanessa. They tried to have me declared incompetent in 2019, hoping to gain control of my assets. They failed, but they will try again with you. I have left you weapons to fight them. Elena read the letter twice, then a third time, feeling something stir in her chest that she had not experienced in years. It took her a moment to identify the sensation. So foreign had it become. Hope. She tilted the envelope, and a heavy iron key slid into her palm. It was old, slightly rusted at the edges, but still solid in the way of things built to last centuries. On the head of the key, a letter H was engraved in Victorian script, the metal worn smooth by decades of handling. Someone had seen her. Someone had watched from afar and decided she was worth saving. Someone had planned for this moment, had anticipated the cruelty of the family, and prepared an escape route. Silver Creek, New Hampshire, 200 miles north, according to the quick search she performed on her cracked phone. The weather reports showed the worst blizzard in 50 years approaching the region, scheduled to arrive within hours. Logic said she should wait. Wait for the storm to pass, wait for safer conditions, wait for common sense to prevail. But Elena had spent her entire adult life waiting for her husband to change, waiting for her family to accept her, waiting for circumstances to improve through patience and hard work and the steady accumulation of small hopes. She was done waiting. That night in the studio apartment that cost half her monthly income despite being barely large enough for a bed and a kitchenette, Elena made her decision. She moved through the cramped space with purpose, pulling out the 2 battered suitcases she had brought when she moved in 3 years ago. Everything they owned that mattered fit inside with room to spare. Clothes for a week, the folder of important documents, the small photo album containing the only pictures left of her mother, basic medicines, and a flashlight and extra batteries. From the nightstand, she retrieved the envelope of emergency cash she kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard. $312, every penny she had managed to save after rent and utilities and food and the cost of keeping a 7-year-old clothed and fed. It was everything. Lily, sweetheart, wake up. Her daughter stirred beneath the covers, eyes blinking against the dim light of the single lamp. Mommy, what time is it? Late, baby, but we are going on an adventure. Those words cut through sleep like magic, and Lily sat up straighter, clutching Mr. Patches with sudden excitement. An adventure? Where are we going? To a house. A very special house that someone left for us. Will we live there? Elena knelt beside the bed, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Maybe, sweetheart. Maybe we will. Is it big? Does it have a yard? Can I have my own room? The questions tumbled out with the breathless hope of a child who had never known anything but cramped quarters and shared spaces. Elena felt tears threaten, but pushed them back. There would be time for emotion later. Now was for action. I do not know what it looks like yet, but we are going to find out together. They left at midnight, slipping out of the building without fanfare or farewell. The Honda Civic waited in its usual spot on the street, a 2008 model with 187,000 miles on the odometer that Elena had purchased for $1,500 from a friend of a friend. The car groaned when she started the engine, the heating system coughing to life at its lowest setting because anything higher had stopped working 2 winters ago. The city fell away behind them as they merged onto I-95 heading north. At this hour, the highway stretched empty in both directions, most sensible people already home and preparing for the storm that weather forecasters had been warning about for days. Occasionally, a salt truck rumbled past, spreading preventative measures on the asphalt. Elena drove with both hands gripping the wheel, her knuckles white against the worn leather. In the rearview mirror, Lily had already fallen back asleep, Mr. Patches tucked beneath her chin, her face peaceful with the complete trust of a child who believed her mother could handle anything. The first snowflakes began falling around 2 in the morning, fat and lazy at first, drifting down like feathers from a torn pillow. Within 30 minutes, they had transformed into something more serious, thick and fast and relentless, turning the world beyond the windshield into an impenetrable wall of white. By 3 in the morning, visibility had dropped to 10 feet at best. The car fought against wind that howled like a living creature, gusts striking the Honda's side with enough force to push it toward the shoulder. Elena had to constantly correct, her arms aching from the effort of keeping them in the proper lane. The road surface became treacherous, black ice hiding beneath fresh snow, waiting to catch the unwary. She could feel the tires searching for grip, that subtle shimmy that warned of conditions beyond the car's capability to handle. At mile marker 42, the moment Elena had been dreading arrived. The car began to slide, the rear end swinging out to the left as the front tires lost their purchase on the ice-slicked asphalt. The world outside spun, headlights sweeping across a landscape of white and darkness. Her father's voice came back to her from years ago, from a winter when he was still alive and family still meant protection instead of rejection. Turn into the skid, Elena. Never fight it, never jerk the wheel. Gentle corrections. Let the car find its balance again. She did as memory instructed, hands moving the wheel in the direction of the skid, foot easing off the gas but not touching the brake. 3 seconds that stretched into eternity, the car fishtailing across the lane while her heart hammered against her ribs. Then traction returned, the tires gripping again, the Honda straightening out as if awakening from a nightmare. Elena released a breath she had not realized she was holding. In the back seat, Lily slept on, undisturbed by the near disaster. Please, Elena whispered to whatever force might be listening. Please just let us get there safely. The exit for Silver Creek appeared through the storm like an answered prayer, the green sign nearly buried under accumulated snow, but still visible enough to catch her headlights. She took the off-ramp slowly, feeling the car protest against the incline, wheels spinning briefly before finding purchase. The GPS on her dying phone directed her onto smaller roads, then dirt roads, then what might have been a private driveway buried under 3 feet of fresh accumulation. The Honda pushed forward like a determined animal, its old engine whining but refusing to quit. And then she saw it. The mansion rose from the darkness like something from another century, a Gothic silhouette against the storm-torn sky. Even buried in snow, even half hidden by the blizzard that raged around it, the structure commanded attention in a way that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. 3 stories of weathered gray stone and dark timber climbed toward the clouds, with Gothic turrets at 2 corners and a wraparound balcony running the length of the 2nd floor. The windows were tall and narrow, Victorian in style, reflecting nothing but the swirl of snowflakes in her headlights. The roof pitched steeply, Designed to shed the weight of New England winters, its slate tiles barely visible beneath the white blanket that covered everything. This was not a house. This was a monument, built by people who believed in permanence, who constructed their homes to outlast generations. It spoke of old money, of railroad fortunes and timber empires, of a time when craftsmanship meant something beyond profit margins. Elena pulled as close to the front entrance as the snow would allow and killed the engine. The sudden silence was overwhelming, broken only by the whistle of wind and the tick of the cooling motor. Lily, she reached back to shake her daughter's shoulder gently. Lily, baby, we are here. The child stirred, eyes opening slowly, taking in the view through the snow-covered window. Wow, Mommy, is that a castle? Almost, sweetheart, they did almost. They gathered the essentials, the suitcases, Elena's purse with the letter and key, Lily's small backpack with her overnight things. The walk from the car to the front door covered perhaps 20 feet, but the wind made it feel like miles, snow stinging their faces and penetrating every gap in their clothing. The massive oak door stood before them, its surface weathered but solid, brass fixtures tarnished by decades of exposure. Elena pulled out the iron key, her fingers already numb from the cold, and fitted it into the lock. The key turned with a click that echoed through the frozen air, the sound of mechanisms engineered to work for centuries. The door swung inward with a groan of hinges, protesting their first movement in weeks, and they stumbled inside, snow following them in a rush of frigid wind. Elena pushed the door shut against the storm and stood for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness. The entrance hall stretched before them like a cathedral of shadows and dust. A grand staircase swept upward into blackness, its mahogany banister carved with intricate designs of flowers and vines that seemed to move in the weak beam of Elena's phone flashlight. Crystal chandeliers hung from 20-foot ceilings, their pendants covered in a fine layer of dust, but still catching the light with hints of their former glory. The marble floors extended in all directions, covered with Persian rugs that had been beautiful once and would be beautiful again once the dust was removed. White sheets draped the furniture, creating ghostly shapes throughout the space, as if the house had been prepared for a long sleep from which Elena's arrival might finally awaken it. The cold inside was intense, perhaps worse than outside because there was no wind to distract from its bite. Their breath formed white clouds in the air, and Elena could feel Lily shivering against her side. Is this really ours, Mommy? Lily's voice emerged as barely a whisper, swallowed by the enormous space around them. Yes, baby, this is really ours. They explored by the weak light of Elena's phone, the battery now down to 12% because she had forgotten to grab the charger in her rush to leave. Each room revealed new wonders that made Elena feel like she had stepped into a storybook rather than a legal inheritance. The library stretched from floor to ceiling with thousands of leather-bound volumes, their spines embossed with gold lettering that had faded but not disappeared. A wooden ladder on brass rails allowed access to the higher shelves, and velvet armchairs in deep green flanked a fireplace large enough to roast a pig. The smell of old leather and aged paper filled the space, the perfume of knowledge accumulated over decades. The dining room contained a table that could seat 20 guests, each chair carved with the same attention to detail as the staircase banister. A smaller chandelier hung over the table's center, and glass-fronted cabinets displayed china that looked antique enough to belong in a museum. The kitchen proved the most practical discovery of all. Here, modernity had made some inroads. The appliances dated from the 1950s, a turquoise Frigidaire refrigerator, and a white O'Keefe and Merit stove. But they appeared functional. More importantly, the cabinets were stocked. Canned goods, dried pasta, rice, beans, flour, sugar, and enough non-perishable supplies to last for weeks. Maggie had prepared for someone to come. She had known that Elena would arrive, and she had ensured that whoever reached this place would not starve while figuring out what to do next. On the second floor, Elena chose the smallest bedroom for them, a corner room with a 4-poster bed in cherrywood and tall windows that looked out over the snow-covered grounds. She could barely see through the storm. She gathered every blanket she could find in the adjacent rooms, piling them onto the mattress until it became a nest of warmth waiting to envelop them. They crawled beneath the layers, still wearing their coats and boots, holding each other for warmth. Outside, the storm raged like something alive and angry. Inside, the old house groaned and creaked, settling around them like a grandmother adjusting her joints. "Tell me a story, Mommy." Elena pulled her daughter closer, feeling the small body begin to warm against her own. Once upon a time, there was a girl who thought she had nothing. No money, no family who cared, no hope for tomorrow. She worked and worked and unworked, and still it was never enough. Lily's breathing began to slow, sleep reaching for her even as she listened. But then she discovered something amazing. She discovered that she had everything that mattered. She had courage that could not be bought. She had love that could not be measured. And she had a daughter who made her want to be brave, even when being brave seemed impossible. What happened to her, Mommy? She found a house where she could start again. And inside that house, she found proof that someone had been watching over her all along. Lily's eyes fluttered closed, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of deep sleep. But sleep would not come for Elena. As she lay there listening to the storm rage outside the walls that now belonged to her, she heard something that made every nerve in her body go cold. Footsteps on the floor below. Soft and deliberate, the sound of someone walking through the rooms they had just explored. Elena slipped from the bed carefully, trying not to wake Lily, and picked up her phone. The battery indicator showed 12%. The screen's glow, the only light in the darkness. She crept to the door and eased it open, wincing at the creak of hinges that had not been oiled in months. The hallway stretched in both directions, swallowed by shadows that her phone's weak flashlight could barely penetrate. She stood motionless, listening, wondering if she had imagined the sound. Another creak echoed from somewhere below, distinct and unmistakable. Fear warred with determination in her chest. This was her house now. Whatever was down there, whoever was down there, she had a right to know. She moved down the hallway slowly, one hand trailing along the wall for balance, following the corridor toward the main staircase. Each step felt exposed, vulnerable, a mother walking away from her sleeping child toward an unknown threat. The grand staircase curved downward into the entrance hall, which was now painted silver by moonlight streaming through tall windows. Elena descended carefully, testing each step before committing her weight, trying to minimize the groans of old wood. Nothing moved in the space below, but there, in the beam of her flashlight, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Fresh footprints in the dust, larger than hers or Lily's, leading from the front door toward the library. "Hello." Her voice came out smaller than intended, swallowed by the enormous space. "Is someone there?" No answer but the howl of wind outside. She followed the footprints to the library, her heart hammering against her ribs with each step. The door stood ajar, though she was certain they had closed it during their expiration. Inside, the smell of old leather and aged paper filled her nostrils, familiar now but still strange. And there, impossibly, on the small table beside a wingback chair, lay an open leather-bound journal. Elena approached slowly, every instinct screaming at her to run back upstairs, to grab Lily, to flee this house and whatever haunted it. But she had not come this far to run from shadows. The journal was filled with Maggie's handwriting, the same elegant script that matched the letter. But the open page was dated only 5 months ago, the ink still dark and fresh-looking. "I know my time is short. The doctors give me weeks, perhaps days. But I have no regrets. This house has been my sanctuary against a world that tried to break me, and now it will be hers. Elena does not know it yet, but she is stronger than anyone in that poisonous family ever gave her credit for. She will find this journal when she is ready. She will find everything when she is ready, and Hank will be there to help her. He promised me 40 years of friendship, and he has never broken a promise. I am tired now, more tired than I have ever been. But I can finally sleep knowing that what I built will go to someone who will understand its worth. Not because she wants to possess it, but because she will use it the way I always hoped. To build something better. To prove that we are more than what they said we were." Tears blurred Elena's vision. Here was proof that she had been thought of, planned for, chosen deliberately by someone who understood what it meant to be cast out and rise anyway. A whisper seemed to drift through the room, so faint she almost missed it. "Welcome home." Elena spun around, heart hammering, phone clutched like a weapon. "Who is there?" Only silence answered, heavy and expectant. She backed toward the door, eyes scanning the shadows for movement, finding nothing. The curtains stirred slightly, but that could have been drafts from the old windows. The books stood silent on their shelves. The chairs held no occupants. Elena ran. Up the stairs, down the hallway, through the door to their bedroom. She locked it behind her, shoved a heavy chair under the handle, and pressed her back against the wall, chest heaving. Lily slept on, undisturbed by her mother's terror. For hours, Elena sat awake, listening to every sound the old house made. The creak of settling timbers, the moan of wind finding gaps in the windows, the occasional thump of snow sliding from the roof. And once, just once, what sounded like a door closing softly on the floor below. Morning came gray and cold, the storm finally exhausted, leaving behind a world transformed into a white expanse that stretched as far as Elena could see. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, turning the bedroom's dust motes into floating gold. In daylight, the terror of the night seemed distant, almost dreamlike. Elena told herself she had imagined the footsteps, the whisper, the journal appearing as if by magic. Old houses made strange noises. Her exhausted mind had conjured threats from shadows. She rose stiffly, every muscle protesting from the combination of stress and cold and sleeping in her clothes. Lily stirred beside her, stretching like a cat in a warm sunbeam. "Mommy, it is so pretty outside." Through the frost-edged window, Elena could see the estate grounds for the first time. Rolling hills of white punctuated by bare trees, a frozen pond glinting in the distance, and outbuildings half buried in snow that might have been stables or workshops or equipment storage. "Let us explore, baby. Let us see what we have found." They ventured out of the bedroom into a house transformed by daylight. The grand staircase curved down into an entrance hall that gleamed with polished marble despite its layer of dust. The chandeliers caught morning sun and scattered it into rainbows. The furniture beneath their sheets were revealed as antiques of obvious value, pieces that belonged in museums or aristocratic estates. Room after room unfolded before them, each more remarkable than the last. A music room with a grand piano, its keys yellowed but still responding when Lily pressed them experimentally. A sunroom with walls of windows and wicker furniture for enjoying summer days. A study lined with awards and photographs showing a woman with silver hair receiving honors from business organizations and charitable foundations. Elena studied the photographs carefully. Maggie had been tall and elegant, her posture never losing its dignity even as age bent her spine. In the earliest pictures, she stood beside a dark-haired man who must have been Benjamin, the husband whose heritage had cost her everything and given her everything at once. In later photos, she appeared alone, but never lonely, surrounded by people who seemed genuinely happy in her presence. On the second floor, they discovered Maggie's bedroom, a spacious suite with a king-size bed in walnut wood, an antique vanity, and a full-length mirror in an ornate carved frame that dominated one wall. Lily wandered around the room while Elena examined the vanity, running her fingers over perfume bottles and jewelry boxes that had not been opened in weeks. The surface held a light layer of dust, but beneath it, everything was arranged with precision, the belongings of someone who valued order and beauty. "Mommy, look!" Lily's voice carried from across the room. "There is a crack here." Elena turned to find her daughter pressing against the edge of the full-length mirror, her small fingers exploring a gap between the frame and the wall. "What did you find, sweetheart?" "It moves." Elena crossed to her daughter's side and examined the frame more closely. There was indeed a gap, subtle enough to escape casual notice, but visible once you knew to look. She pressed where Lily was pressing, and something clicked softly inside the wall. The mirror swung inward, revealing a narrow passage beyond. They stared at the opening, mother and daughter, neither moving for a long moment. "A secret door," Lily breathed, her eyes shining with the wonder that only children can summon. Like in fairy tales. Elena took her daughter's hand and retrieved her phone from her pocket. The battery had somehow survived the night, still showing 8%, enough for what might lie ahead. The passage rose upward, a narrow staircase built into the space between walls, its steps worn smooth by years of use. Dust swirled in the beam of Elena's flashlight, disturbed for the first time in what might have been months. The air smelled stale but not unpleasant, like paper and paint and the particular mustiness of spaces long sealed. They climbed in silence, Lily gripping her mother's hand with fierce intensity, until the passage opened into the most beautiful room Elena had ever seen. Natural light flooded in through massive skylights set into the roof, north-facing to capture the soft, even illumination that artists prized above all else. The walls were lined with canvases in various stages of completion, still lifes of flowers and fruit, landscapes showing the hills and forests around Silver Creek, portraits of people whose faces showed remarkable individuality. This was an artist's studio, and the artist had been talented beyond anything Elena would have expected from a businesswoman who had built an empire from exile. Easels stood throughout the space, some holding works in progress, others empty and waiting. Tables held supplies, brushes in every size, tubes of oil paint, palettes stained with the accumulated colors of years. The smell of linseed oil and turpentine hung faintly in the air. Ghosts of creative sessions passed. But it was the painting in the center of the room, on the largest easel, that made Elena stop breathing. The canvas showed the mansion itself, rendered in summer glory rather than winter white. Flowers bloomed in carefully tended gardens. Trees wore full crowns of green. Sunshine turned everything to gold, and the house seemed to glow with warmth and welcome. In one of the upper windows, a figure stood looking out. Two figures, actually, rendered with such precise detail that there could be no mistake. A woman with long, dark hair and tired eyes that still held determination. A child with twin braids and a wide smile, holding a stuffed rabbit in the crook of her arm. The woman looked exactly like Elena. The child looked exactly like Lily. The rabbit looked exactly like Mr. Patches. "She painted us, Mommy." Lily's voice was small with wonder. "But we never met her. How did she know what we look like?" Elena moved closer to the canvas, examining the brushwork with trembling hands. The painting was unfinished, perhaps 80% complete, with some areas still showing the preliminary sketches beneath thin layers of paint. But the figures in the window were fully realized, every detail perfect, from the specific shade of Lily's hair to the loose stitching on Mr. Patch's left ear. "I do not know, baby." The words came out as a whisper. I do not know how she knew. On a small table beside the easel, she found sketchbooks documenting years of work, hundreds of drawings, studies, experiments with color and form, and on the last page of the most recent book, a note in Maggie's careful script. "For Elena, when you find this place, this house gave me freedom. I hope it gives you the same. Look for the numbers where dreams were sworn." Elena read the words 3 times, committing them to memory. A clue, a puzzle, something more to discover in this house of secrets and shadows. The sound of an engine cut through the silence of the morning. Elena moved to the studio's window and looked down at the snow-covered driveway below. A pickup truck was making its way toward the house, a Ford F-150 that had seen better days, but was handling the deep snow with the confidence of a vehicle that had been doing this for decades. The truck stopped near where Elena's Honda sat half buried, and a figure climbed out. A man, perhaps late 60s, wearing a brown Carhartt jacket faded by years of use, a gray wool cap and work boots covered in snow. He was tall and lean, with the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime working outdoors, and he moved with the careful efficiency of a person who knew his body's limits but refused to surrender to them. He looked up at the house, and even from this distance, Elena could see his eyes were red, as if he had been crying or had not slept well in a long time. Perhaps both. Something in his posture suggested not threat but purpose, not invasion but arrival long expected. Elena descended from the studio, through the secret passage, down the grand staircase to the front door. She paused with her hand on the handle, fear and hope warring in her chest. Then she opened the door. The man stood on the porch, snow swirling around him, his breath forming white clouds in the cold air. Up close, his face showed the deep lines of someone who had lived fully, with laugh creases around his eyes and worry furrows across his forehead. His eyes were gray-blue and sharper than his weathered appearance might suggest. "You must be Elena." His voice was hoarse but warm, carrying the hint of a rural New Hampshire accent. "I am Henry Callahan. Most people call me Hank." He paused, and something in his expression shifted toward grief barely contained. "I was Maggie's neighbor for 40 years, her friend for just as long. Behind Elena, Lily appeared, clutching Mr. Patches with both hands. The man's gaze dropped to the child, and his face softened in a way that made Elena's fear begin to dissolve. "She told me you would come," Hank continued. "She made me promise to be here when you did." He reached into the bed of his truck and lifted a container. "I brought portable heaters, fuel oil, and hot food. That house has been cold for weeks, and you have a child to keep warm. May I come in?" Elena studied this stranger for a long moment, searching for the threat she had been conditioned to expect. She found only exhaustion and sadness in something that looked almost like relief. "How did you know we arrived? The storm only ended a few hours ago." Hank's lips curved into something not quite a smile. "Maggie had sensors installed at the entrance to the property. They alert my phone when anyone comes up the drive. She put them in after your brother and sister showed up uninvited in 2019, trying to have her declared incompetent so they could take control of her money." The letter's warning echoed in Elena's mind. "Be careful of Derek and Vanessa." "She knew they would come for you too," Hank said quietly. "When they found out what she left you, they would come. She wanted you to be ready." Elena looked at this man who had appeared like a guardian from the storm, carrying supplies and warmth and answers to questions she had barely begun to form. She looked at Lily, who was watching Hank with the open curiosity of a child who had not yet learned to fear strangers. She looked back at the house that was now hers, full of secrets and paintings and a future she could not yet imagine. "Yes," she said finally. "Please come in." The basement stretched before them in shadows and cold concrete, pipes running along the ceiling like metal arteries carrying heat that had gone dormant. Hank's industrial flashlight cut through the darkness with 850 lumens of focused power, illuminating equipment that Elena had never encountered in her life of rented apartments and neglected buildings. "Maggie installed dual heating systems back in 1995, Hank explained as he moved toward a control panel mounted on the far wall. "Primary runs on heating oil, 500-gallon tank out behind the garage, needs to be filled every winter. Backup is propane, 2,000-gallon tanks on the east side of the property." His calloused fingers traced the gauges and switches with the familiarity of long practice. "I topped off the propane last week, just in case. 80% full. Should carry you through February if you keep the thermostat at 68. Elena watched as he demonstrated the controls, explaining each step in the patient rhythm of someone who had taught many lessons over many years. The switch to transfer between systems. The emergency shutoff valves. The pilot light indicators in what each color meant. "The oil tank is probably half empty by now," Hank continued. "I will call Peterson's Fuel tomorrow and get them out here. They knew Maggie for decades. They will put you on the regular delivery schedule." The systems hummed to life under his experienced hands, and within minutes, Elena could hear the distant rush of warm air beginning to flow through the vents above them. Lily had followed them down but stayed close to her mother, eyes wide as she watched this stranger work magic with machines she did not understand. "You know this house better than I ever will," Elena said quietly. Hank paused, his hand still resting on the control panel. "I have been taking care of it for 40 years, first as a favor, then as a friend, then as—" He stopped, and something in his voice cracked slightly. "Maggie did not have anyone else. No children. Her husband left decades ago. Her family had abandoned her before I ever met her. This house and the people in Silver Creek were all she had." They returned upstairs where the air was already beginning to warm, the ancient radiators clicking and groaning as they accepted heat for the first time in weeks. In the kitchen, Hank unpacked the containers he had brought. Thermoses of hot coffee and cocoa, containers of homemade soup still warm from his own stove, bread that smelled like it had been baked that morning. Lily accepted a cup of cocoa with both hands wrapped around its warmth, her earlier shyness melting in the face of chocolate and kindness. She sat at the massive kitchen table, Mr. Patches propped beside her, watching the adults with the patient attention of a child who had learned that sometimes the best way to understand was simply to observe. "You said you were her neighbor," Elena began, settling into a chair across from Hank. "How did you meet?" The question opened something in his face, a door to decades of memory. 1984. "My wife Martha and I had just moved to Silver Creek. I was a contractor then, Carpenter by trade, but willing to take any job that paid. We bought the property next door to this one, 40 acres of forest, in a house that needed more work than we could really afford. He paused, staring into his coffee as if the past was visible in its dark surface. Maggie showed up on our doorstep the second day we were there, brought us a casserole and a bottle of wine and an offer to help with anything we needed. She was already in her 50s then, already wealthy from investments her husband had fumbled and she had salvaged. But she never acted like she was better than anyone. She just wanted to be part of something, to belong somewhere that would not cast her out. And you became friends. Eventually, Martha and we were struggling those first years. Work was inconsistent, bills piled up. We had a son, Tommy, and sometimes I did not know how we would feed him. Hank's jaw tightened with old pain. Maggie found out somehow. She never said how, but suddenly I was getting calls for jobs I had not applied for, recommendations from people I had never met. She was pulling strings behind the scenes, making sure we survived, and she never once asked for credit or gratitude. Elena thought about the letter in her pocket, about Maggie's words regarding watching from a distance, helping without seeking recognition. She sounds like she was remarkable. She was the best person I ever knew. Hank's voice roughened. When Martha got sick in 2012, the cancer that would eventually take her, our insurance refused to cover the treatments. Some bureaucratic nonsense about pre-existing conditions and experimental procedures. We were looking at losing the house, losing everything, just to buy her another year. He fell silent for a moment, composing himself. Maggie paid for it, all of it. $300,000 in medical bills, wiped clean. She made us promise never to tell anyone, never to try to pay her back. She said, he swallowed hard. She said that the only repayment she wanted was for me to be there when someone else needed help, to pass it on. The kitchen fell quiet except for the growing warmth of the heating system and Lily's quiet slurping of cocoa. Martha passed in 2013, Hank continued, and my son Tommy, he could not handle the grief. He blamed me, I think, for not being able to save her, for accepting charity instead of finding another way. He left a few months after the funeral and never came back. 10 years now, without a word. I am sorry. Elena meant it, feeling the weight of his loss as a reflection of her own. Maggie got me through. After Martha, after Tommy, I was ready to give up. Sell the property, drink myself to death, just fade away. But she would not let me. She came over every day, made me eat, made me work, made me remember that survival itself is worth something even when it does not feel that way. His eyes met Elena's, and she saw in them a reflection of her own journey through abandonment and perseverance. That is why I am here. Not because she asked me to be, though she did. I am here because I owe her everything, and the only way I can repay her now is to make sure you have the chance she wanted to give you. Over the following days, Hank became a constant presence at the mansion, arriving each morning with supplies or tools or simply his company. He taught Elena the house's systems with the patience of a master craftsman, which circuit breakers controlled which rooms, where the water main shutoff was located, how to identify the warning signs of frozen pipes before they burst. They worked side by side on repairs that had accumulated during Maggie's final months of illness. A leaking faucet in one of the upstairs bathrooms required replacing the worn washers, and Hank guided Elena through the process step by step, showing her how to shut off the water supply, disassemble the fixture, identify the worn components, and reassemble everything with proper technique. Maggie always said that knowing how to fix things was better than having money to pay for fixes, he observed as Elena tightened the final connection. Money can run out. Skills stay with you forever. The front door's hinges had rusted nearly solid from decades of New England weather. Hank produced a penetrating oil and a wire brush, demonstrating how to clean the corrosion without damaging the original brass. These are from 1927, when the house was built. You cannot buy craftsmanship like this anymore. Worth saving. On the third day, he led her up to the roof, climbing a 28-foot extension ladder with the confidence of someone who had made the ascent hundreds of times before. Elena followed despite her fear of heights, determined to understand every aspect of her new responsibility. Welsh slate, Hank said, tapping the gray tiles with a practiced hand. Same as the original installation. A good slate roof lasts 100 years with proper maintenance. You need to check every spring for cracked or loose tiles, inspect the flashing around the chimney, clear the valleys of debris. He showed her the signs of wear to look for, the technique for securing loose tiles with specialized adhesive, the suppliers who could provide matching replacements if needed. The view from the roof revealed the full scope of the estate: 43 acres of forested hills and open meadows, the frozen pond glinting in the distance, the boundaries marked by old stone walls that had been built when this was still farmland. "All of this is yours now," Hank said quietly. "Maggie spent 70 years building something that would outlast her, and she chose you to carry it forward." In the evenings, after Lily had fallen asleep in the bedroom they had claimed as their own, Elena sat in the library reading Maggie's journals, dozens of volumes spanning 7 decades, each one filled with the elegant handwriting she had come to recognize as readily as her own. The earliest entries dated from 1954, the year Maggie had been cast out. "Father said I am no longer his daughter." Mother stood silent as a statue, not speaking a single word. "My sister Eleanor, 15 and too young to understand, cried and begged me not to leave. Benjamin held my hand as we walked out of the house I grew up in. He said we would build something more beautiful than anything they could imagine. He was right, but it would take 50 years before I believed it." Elena traced the faded ink with her fingertips, feeling across decades the same pain she had experienced in that Manhattan conference room. The journals chronicled Maggie's rise from exile, early years of struggle, working as a secretary while Benjamin developed his inventions in their cramped apartment. The heartbreak of stolen patents in 1960, when a larger company appropriated his designs and buried them in litigation they could not afford to fight. Benjamin is consumed by rage over the injustice. He cannot sleep. He cannot eat. He can only stare at the wall and curse the system that allows the powerful to crush the innovative. But I told him, if they were willing to steal, it means the idea had value. Create the next thing. Protect it better. Use their cruelty as fuel. He hates when I am right. But he listens. By 1975, persistence had paid off. Benjamin's automatic pressure valve system found success. Licensed to major automotive manufacturers with royalties that provided steady income for the first time in their marriage. Ford, GM, Chrysler. They all want to license the patent now. Benjamin wanted to sell outright, take the money and retire. But I insisted on royalties, a percentage of every unit produced. He thinks I am being greedy. I am being patient. There is a difference. The money is starting to flow. Not a flood, but enough. And I am beginning to invest. Apple went public today. Benjamin thinks I am insane to put money into a computer company. He says people will never want these machines in their homes. But I looked at that young man, Steve Jobs, at the hunger in his eyes, and I saw someone who would not stop until he changed the world. Sometimes you have to bet on hunger over experience. The 98 entries revealed the fracture that had ended her marriage. 50 years. I gave Benjamin 50 years of my life. And what I received in return was betrayal beyond forgiveness, not infidelity. I might have understood that. People are weak, bodies are hungry, an affair I could have processed eventually. But this was different. Benjamin had been gambling, for years apparently, hiding the losses, borrowing against the patents, risking everything we had built together. When I discovered the truth, we were 3 weeks from losing the house. My lawyer saved me. Because the loans were in his name alone, secured by assets registered to his business rather than our joint holdings, I could extract my portion before the creditors claimed everything else. The divorce was final last month. I kept the mansion. Benjamin left with enough money to survive, but not enough to thrive. I am not cruel, but I will never forgive him, and I am free. For the first time in 50 years, I answered to no one but myself. It feels like being born again. The later journals turned toward family research and surveillance that made Elena's skin prickle with the strangeness of it all. Pages documented her own life in detail she had never imagined anyone tracking. Her marriage to Miguel in 2016, Lily's birth in 2017, Miguel's abandonment in 2021. Hank brought photographs today. Elena at the diner, working double shifts even though she can barely stay awake. Lily at the playground, playing alone because her mother cannot afford the after-school programs that provide supervision. I watch these images and see myself at that age, fighting, surviving, refusing to give up even when every force in the world conspires to push you down. Eleanor, my sister, who was really my daughter, never knew the truth about our relationship. When I tried to tell her in 1990, after father confessed on his deathbed, she refused to listen, said I was lying, said I was trying to steal the inheritance she expected. The irony would be amusing if it were not so tragic. She abandoned me twice, once when she was too young to know better, and once when she chose not to believe the truth. And yet I cannot hate her. She was a victim of the same system that exiled me. But Elena is different. She has the strength I had and none of the bitterness I accumulated. She could break the cycle. She could be what none of us managed to become, whole. On the seventh morning, Hank arrived with something other than tools or supplies. He carried a manila folder thick with documents, his face grim with purpose. "There is something you need to see," he said, spreading the contents across the kitchen table after Lily had gone to explore the library. "Maggie collected this over years. I think she wanted you to understand exactly what you are dealing with." The folder contained investigation reports from a private detective agency dated between 2019 and 2024. Photographs, email printouts, financial records, all focused on two subjects, Derek and Vanessa Reyes. Elena read with growing horror. Derek's file revealed a pattern of borderline criminality hidden behind his hedge fund credentials. An SEC investigation in 2017 for insider trading, closed for insufficient evidence but not exonerated. A client complaint in 2018 alleging embezzlement, settled out of court with a confidentiality agreement, and emails from 2019 that made her stomach turn. To Vanessa Reyes Hamilton. From Derek Reyes. Subject, Holloway opportunity. I had my people look into the old woman's assets. Conservative estimate is 50 million, possibly much more. She's 82, living alone, no children, no close relatives except us. If we can get a court to declare her mentally incompetent, we can petition for conservatorship and take control of the entire estate. The beauty is that no one will question us. We're family. We're concerned relatives looking out for a vulnerable elderly woman. By the time anyone realizes what happened, we'll have liquidated everything and moved on. Let me know when you're in town and we can discuss strategy. Vanessa's file showed a different flavor of corruption. Fraudulent business practices, fake reviews to boost her interior design company, a lawsuit from a client she had overcharged by 300%, settled quietly to avoid publicity. But the most damning documents came from 2023, communications between Derek and an attorney Elena did not recognize. Regarding Margaret Holloway, I have contacted a specialist who can identify irregularities in any will document. His fees are substantial, but his track record is impeccable. If the old woman dies before we can establish a competency, we will need alternative strategies to challenge whatever she leaves behind. They have been planning this for years, Elena said, the pages trembling in her hands. Maggie knew. Hank's voice carried the weight of long anger. After they showed up in 2019 with their lawyers and their fake concern, she hired her own investigators. She wanted to know exactly who she was dealing with. And she kept all of this. She kept everything. She said, "Hank, they will come for Elena. They will try to take what I am leaving her, and when they do, she needs ammunition." Elena spread the documents across the table, seeing her brother and sister with new clarity. Not just greedy relatives disappointed by a will, but calculating predators who had been circling Maggie for years, waiting for the opportunity to strike. "There is more," Hank said quietly, "in the house. A room on the third floor that Maggie converted into a vault. She told me about it 5 years ago, made me memorize the location in case something happened to her before you arrived. Everything she accumulated over 70 years is in there." The passage to the vault was hidden behind what appeared to be a linen closet on the third floor. Hank demonstrated the mechanism, a specific panel pushed in a precise sequence, and the entire back wall swung inward to reveal a narrow staircase climbing higher. They ascended into a space that ran the full width of the mansion, climate-controlled despite the winter cold outside, equipped with humidity sensors and temperature regulators that maintain museum-quality preservation conditions. Filing cabinets lined one wall, labeled by decade from 1940 to 2020. Glass display cases held jewelry, coins, and what appeared to be original stock certificates from companies that had since grown into giants. And dominating the center of the room stood a massive safe built directly into the wall. Its green paint and brass fixtures gleamed despite decades of dust elsewhere, clearly maintained with care, even as other parts of the house had been allowed to settle into neglect. Above a small desk, a framed document hung on the wall. Elena moved closer to read the elegant calligraphy. In 27, this house was born, where 43 acres dreams were sworn. In 48, two hearts combined. In 98, freedom I did find. Numbers, Elena said softly. She is giving me the combination. Hank nodded, but not in chronological order. In order of what mattered most to her heart. That is what she told me. The sequence reflects her values, not the calendar. Elena studied the poem, connecting each line to what she had learned from the journals. The house built in 1927, the property spanning 43 acres, the marriage in 1948, the divorce in 1998. But which came first in Maggie's heart? She thought about the woman who had emerged from those pages, someone who had lost everything, family, recognition, eventually even her husband, someone who had rebuilt from nothing, finding freedom and self-reliance. The land first, Elena reasoned aloud. Where dreams were sworn, that is where she built her foundation. 43. Then the house that rose from that land. 27. Then freedom from a marriage that had become a prison. 98. And finally, last in her heart, the marriage itself that she had believed in and been betrayed by. 48. 27, 98. 48. She approached the vault, her hands steadier than she expected. The dial felt cold and solid beneath her fingers, the mechanical precision of another era when things were built to last. The first number clicked into place, then the second, the third, the fourth. The final click echoed through the room like the period at the end of a sentence that had taken 70 years to write. The heavy door swung open with surprising ease, revealing Maggie's life work in concentrated form. The interior lights flickered on automatically, fluorescent tubes humming to life. Elena stepped inside and felt her knees weaken. Stacks of bearer bonds and $100,000 denominations, bundled with meticulous care. Stock certificates for Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all purchased decades ago when they were worth almost nothing and held through every market fluctuation until now. Glass cases mounted on the walls displayed small paintings that even Elena's untrained eye could recognize as potentially priceless. Impressionist works, a portrait that might have been a sergeant, landscapes signed with names she had seen in museum catalogs, property deeds to houses in 3 states, gold coins in protective cases, silver bullion in neat rows, and on a pedestal at the center, a leather box containing a handwritten inventory in Maggie's familiar script. Elena opened the box with trembling hands and read aloud. Total assets as of June 2024, bearer bonds, $87 million. Stock certificates, $112 million. Real estate holdings, $43 million. Art collection, $18 million. Rare coins and precious metals, $15 million. She had to stop. The number at the bottom of the page blurred in her vision. Total estimated value, $265 million. She sank to the floor, overwhelmed by a figure too large to comprehend. More money than she had ever imagined existing in one place. More than her family had denied her. Enough to ensure Lily's future and help countless others she would never meet. Then the sound of approaching vehicles shattered the moment. Through the vault's small window, Elena saw a black SUV making its way up the snow-covered drive, expensive and aggressive and entirely wrong for this rural landscape. Behind it came a second vehicle, a luxury sedan that had no business on roads not cleared since the storm. "They are here," Hank said, his voice dropping to something hard and cold. "Faster than I expected." Derek and Vanessa burst into the vault 20 minutes later, accompanied by 2 men in dark suits whose bearings suggested lawyers accustomed to intimidation. They had demanded entry at the front door, threatening legal action until Elena had allowed them inside rather than create a scene that might wake Lily from her nap. "Well, well," Derek said, his eyes scanning the vault with barely concealed greed. "Look what we found. Our struggling sister hiding in a mansion stuffed with treasure. Elena positioned herself between the intruders and the vault's contents. Get out. This is my property. You are trespassing. Vanessa laughed, the sound sharp as breaking crystal. Your property? We are family, darling. What belongs to you belongs to all of us. That is how families work. The lead lawyer stepped forward, briefcase in hand, his demeanor suggesting countless such confrontations in his career. Miss Reyes, there appears to have been a misunderstanding. Mrs. Holloway's will is being contested. Your relationship to the deceased is questionable at best, and until the matter is settled in court, all assets must be frozen. Catherine Walsh has been reported to the State Bar Association, Derek added with cold satisfaction. Conflict of interest, improper handling of estate assets. Her license is under review as we speak. They had planned this, used their connections to attack on multiple fronts, tearing apart what Maggie had carefully built. We are prepared to be generous, Vanessa said, producing papers from a designer bag that cost more than Elena's monthly salary had been. Sign over your rights to the property, and we will give you $50,000, more money than you have ever had at once in your entire life. And if I refuse? The lawyer's smile held no warmth. Then we tie this up in litigation for years. You spend whatever money you have fighting a battle you cannot possibly win. The legal fees alone will bankrupt you. Why not take the sensible path? Elena looked at Lily, who had been awakened by the commotion and now stood in the doorway with Mr. Patch's clutch to her chest. Fear filled those young eyes, confusion at why angry strangers had invaded their new home. Something crystallized in Elena's chest, hard as steel and twice as strong. No, excuse me? Derek's expression flickered with surprise. I said no, this house is mine. Whatever is in it is mine. Maggie left it to me because she understood something you never will. Elena's voice rose, steady and clear. You cannot have it. Not a single painting, not a single dollar, not a single soin of this foundation. Vanessa's mask slipped, revealing the ugly reality beneath the polished surface. You are making a terrible mistake. Maybe, but it is mine to make. Derek stepped closer, his size meant to intimidate, his proximity a threat. Listen very carefully, little sister. We have resources you cannot imagine. Lawyers, connections, investigators. We will dig into every aspect of your pathetic life. We will prove you manipulated a dying woman. We will take everything and leave you with less than nothing. Get out of my house. This is not over. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to leave bruises. We will be back with court orders, with police, with... Remove your hand from her immediately, or I will arrest you for assault. The voice came from the doorway, and every head turned toward its source. Sheriff James Bradley stood there in full uniform, his hand resting on the cuffs at his belt, his face carrying the stern authority of someone who did not tolerate trouble in his jurisdiction. Derek released Elena's arm but did not step back. This is a family matter. It does not concern local law enforcement. Trespassing concerns me, Bradley replied evenly. Assault concerns me, and I received a call 20 minutes ago about vehicles forcing entry onto private property without the owner's permission. His eyes swept the room, taking in the lawyers in the vault and the fear on Lily's face. I am going to ask you once to leave. If I have to ask twice, we take this conversation downtown. For a moment, Derek seemed ready to argue, but the lawyers were already gathering their things, recognizing a losing battle when they saw one. We will return with proper documentation, the lead attorney said smoothly. A court order requiring access to these assets pending resolution of the estate dispute. You do that through proper channels, Bradley said. But right now, you leave. They retreated, Derek throwing one last look at Elena that promised future pain. This is not over, he repeated. Not by a long way. I am not hiding, Elena replied, surprised by the steel in her own voice. I am standing right here, and I am not going anywhere. After the vehicles had disappeared down the drive, Sheriff Bradley removed his hat and studied Elena with careful assessment. Mrs. Holloway was a friend to this community for 40 years. We do not forget that kind of friendship. He handed her a card with his direct number. Anyone bothers you day or night, you call me. That evening, as the sun set behind the snow-covered hills, more vehicles began to arrive. A convoy of pickup trucks filled with people Elena had never met, but who introduced themselves as if they had known her all their lives. Rosa Chen, a woman in her 60s who ran the only diner in Silver Creek, arrived with enough casseroles to feed an army. Maggie ate breakfast at my place every Tuesday for 40 years. Eggs and toast, never changed her order once. And she tipped 3 times the price of the meal every single time. Pete Morrison, an electrician in his 50s, offered to upgrade the mansion's security system at no charge. She paid for my wife's surgery in 2015. Insurance would not cover it, said it was experimental. Maggie wrote a check that same day, would not hear of repayment. Others followed with similar stories. The contractor whose failing business Maggie had quietly saved, the teacher whose student loans she had anonymously paid off, the family whose house she had purchased and returned to them when the bank tried to foreclose. Why did she do all this? Elena asked Rosa as they stood in the kitchen, watching the community organize itself around a cause. Rosa's eyes grew soft with memory. She told me once that when she was young, she had no one. Her family abandoned her, and she had to build everything from nothing. She said that kind of loneliness either makes you cruel or makes you compassionate, and she chose compassion every time. But she could have done so much with that money herself. She did, Rosa smiled. She spent it becoming irreplaceable to everyone who mattered. And now that she is gone, we repay her by taking care of what she left behind. The phone rang, an old landline that Elena had not realized still worked. Hank answered, spoke briefly, and handed her the receiver with a look of cautious hope. Elena, this is Walter Morrison. The voice on the other end belonged to an elderly man, sharp and precise despite his years. I was Maggie Holloway's attorney for 30 years. I witnessed her will, and I am prepared to defend it in court. They are already challenging it, Elena said. Derek and Vanessa claim. I know exactly what they claim, Walter interrupted, and I have spent the last 2 weeks preparing a response that will crush their case before it begins. The emergency hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10. Judge Marianne Fletcher presiding. Tomorrow, but I do not have. You have everything you need. Maggie made sure of that. His voice softened slightly. She was my friend too, Elena, and she asked me to ensure that when this fight came, you would not face it alone. Elena hung up the phone and looked around the kitchen filled with strangers who had become allies. Hank stood by the window watching the last trucks depart. Rosa was organizing the donated food in the refrigerator. Sheriff Bradley had returned with promises of patrol cars making regular passes by the property. In the doorway, Lily watched everything with those observant eyes that missed nothing. Mommy, are the bad people coming back? Elena crossed to her daughter and knelt to meet her gaze. Maybe. Probably. But you know what? We have friends now, and friends help each other fight. Lily considered this with the seriousness only a child could muster. Then she held up Mr. Patches. Mr. Patches says we are going to be okay. He says the lady who made the paintings is watching over us. Elena pulled her daughter close, feeling the small body warm against her own, and allowed herself to believe that might be true. The Silver Creek courthouse rose against a gray March sky, its century-old marble columns speaking of justice and permanence in a world that often lacked both. Elena arrived an hour before the scheduled hearing, dressed in the best outfit Rosa Chen had found at the church thrift store, a navy blazer that nearly fit, a white blouse with only a small mend at the cuff, and black pants that had been tailored the previous night by a retired seamstress who owed Maggie for putting her grandson through community college. Lily walked beside her mother, one hand gripping Mr. Patches, the other wrapped around Elena's fingers with the fierce intensity of a child who sensed that something important was about to happen. They climbed the courthouse steps together, past the inscribed words above the entrance that promised equal justice under law. Inside the crowded hallway, Derek and Vanessa waited with their legal team. 3 attorneys in suits that cost more than Elena's car, their briefcases polished, their expressions radiating the confidence of people accustomed to winning through superior resources. Derek wore a charcoal brioni that fit like armor, his Rolex catching the fluorescent light with each subtle movement. Vanessa had chosen understated elegance, her jewelry modest by her standards, but still worth more than everything Elena owned. Behind Elena, filling the wooden benches that lined the corridor, sat the people of Silver Creek. Rosa Chen in her Sunday best. Pete Morrison with his wife, whose surgery Maggie had funded years ago. Sheriff Bradley in civilian clothes, but carrying himself with the same authority he wore with his badge. Hank stood closest, his weathered face set with determination, his calloused hands clasped before him like a man preparing for battle. Walter Morrison arrived last, a leather portfolio under one arm, his silver hair combed back from a face that showed every one of his 78 years, but also the sharp intelligence that had made him Maggie's trusted counsel for 3 decades. He nodded to Elena with quiet confidence. Remember what I told you. Answer only what you are asked. Tell the truth. And trust that Maggie planned for this moment better than they could possibly imagine. The bailiff called the case, and they filed into a courtroom that smelled of old wood and older law. Judge Marianne Fletcher entered through the side door, her black robes flowing around a frame that suggested steel wrapped in silk. She was 62 years old, silver-haired like Walter, with eyes that had witnessed 4 decades of human nature at its worst and occasionally its best. Her reputation preceded her, fair but merciless toward those who wasted her time or insulted her intelligence. She settled into her chair and surveyed the packed courtroom with an expression that betrayed nothing. This is an emergency hearing regarding a motion to freeze assets in contest the will of Margaret Holloway, deceased. Petitioners are Derek Reyes and Vanessa Reyes Hamilton. Respondent is Elena Reyes. Counsel, you may proceed. The lead attorney for Derek and Vanessa rose with practiced smoothness, buttoning his jacket as he approached the bench. Bradley Thompson of Thompson & Associates, according to the nameplate on his briefcase, a Manhattan firm known for aggressive estate litigation. Your Honor, my clients are the legitimate blood relatives of Margaret Holloway, connected through her sister Eleanor Reyes. They bring this petition out of genuine concern that Mrs. Holloway's estate has been inappropriately directed to a distant relation with questionable claims to the deceased. He placed a folder on the bench. Miss Elena Reyes never lived in this community. She never maintained a meaningful relationship with Mrs. Holloway. By her own admission, she met the deceased exactly once, when she was 8 years old. Yet somehow she emerges as the sole beneficiary of an estate valued at over $200 million. The number rippled through the courtroom, drawing whispers from spectators who had not known the full scope of what was at stake. This pattern suggests undue influence, Thompson continued. We believe Mrs. Holloway was manipulated in her final months by unknown parties seeking to redirect her wealth away from legitimate family members. Furthermore, we have evidence that the will itself may be compromised. He produced additional documents. The attorney who handled Mrs. Holloway's estate, Catherine Walsh, is currently under investigation by the State Bar for ethical violations. Her involvement cast doubt on every document she prepared, including the will in question. Thompson paused for effect, then delivered what he clearly believed would be the killing blow. Finally, Your Honor, we present this, a contract for the sale of the Holloway property, executed by Mrs. Holloway 2 months before her death. This document transfers ownership of the mansion and surrounding land to my clients for the sum of $5 million. It is signed, witnessed, and notarized. Whatever the will may say, this contract supersedes it. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Fletcher. Elena felt her stomach drop as the judge examined the pages with careful attention. Walter Morrison rose slowly, his movements carrying the weight of experience that Thompson's polish could not match. Your Honor, may I respond? Fletcher nodded without looking up from the contract. I personally witnessed Mrs. Holloway's will 6 months before her death. I have known Maggie Holloway for 30 years, handled her legal affairs for most of that time, and I can attest without reservation that she was of completely sound mind when she dictated her final wishes. He approached the bench with his own folder. The will was executed in full compliance with state law, witnessed by 3 unrelated parties whose depositions I have here. The ethics complaint against Catherine Walsh is baseless retaliation, filed by petitioners only after they learned they were not receiving what they felt entitled to. Walter paused, letting his words settle before continuing. As for this alleged sales contract, I invite the court to examine the witnesses listed on page 3. Their names are Martha Hendricks and Robert Chen. I have contacted both individuals, and both are prepared to testify under oath that they never signed any document with the petitioners. Their signatures have been forged. Thompson objected, but Walter continued over him. Furthermore, the notary listed on this document, one James Patterson, had his license revoked in 2021. The grounds for revocation were, and I quote, fraudulent notarization of documents he never witnessed being signed. This contract is not merely invalid. It is evidence of criminal fraud. The color drained from Derek's face. Beside him, Vanessa whispered urgently to their second attorney, who was already flipping through documents with increasing desperation. Judge Fletcher looked up from the papers, her expression hardening. Mr. Thompson, are you aware that submitting forged documents to this court constitutes a felony? Your Honor, my clients provided this document in good faith. If there are irregularities, Fletcher's voice cut like a blade. You are presenting a contract notarized by someone stripped of their authority 3 years ago. Either you failed to perform basic due diligence, or you knowingly brought fraudulent evidence into my courtroom. Neither option reflects well on your representation. She set the contract aside with visible distaste. Furthermore, I have lived in this county for 40 years. I knew Maggie Holloway personally. She was brilliant, independent, and more determined than anyone I have ever met. If she chose to leave her estate to her great niece instead of relatives who never visited, never called, and returned every letter unopened, that was entirely her right. Walter raised his hand slightly. Your Honor, if I may present additional evidence? Fletcher nodded. Mrs. Holloway left sealed documents to be opened only if her will was contested. These contain family genealogy research and DNA test results that reveal a truth hidden for 70 years. He distributed copies to the court and opposing counsel, then continued with the gravity of someone revealing history. Elena Reyes is not merely Maggie Holloway's great-niece through Eleanor's family line. DNA evidence proves she is Maggie's biological great-granddaughter, connected through a family secret that was buried before Elena's mother was even born. The courtroom erupted. Derek half rose from the seat before his attorney pulled him back down. Vanessa's carefully maintained composure shattered into something ugly and desperate. Walter waited for order to be restored before explaining. In 1953, Margaret Holloway gave birth to a daughter out of wedlock. She was 17 years old, and her parents forced her to give the child up to maintain family appearances. But rather than send the baby to strangers, they raised her themselves, presenting her to the world as Maggie's younger sister. That child was Eleanor Reyes, grandmother to Elena. He let the weight of revelation settle over the room. Maggie learned the truth in '90, when her father confessed on his deathbed. She tried to tell Eleanor, but Eleanor refused to listen, refused to believe that her entire identity had been built on a lie. The sisters never reconciled. But Maggie never stopped watching over Eleanor's descendants, never stopped hoping that someday she might give them what had been denied to her, the truth and the resources to build something better with it. Judge Fletcher studied the DNA results with the careful attention of someone who understood their implications. This does not change the will's validity, she observed, but it certainly undermines any argument that Miss Reyes was an inappropriate beneficiary. There is one more thing, Your Honor. Walter turned toward the gallery. I would like to call Henry Callahan to provide testimony. Hank walked to the witness stand with the measured pace of someone who had waited a long time for this moment. His calloused hands rested on the wooden railing as he was sworn in. Mr. Callahan, what was your relationship with the deceased? Maggie was my neighbor for 40 years, my friend for all of them. His voice carried the roughness of grief still fresh despite the weeks since her passing. She was the closest thing to family I had after I lost my wife and my son. And did Mrs. Holloway ever discuss her estate plans with you? She did, many times, especially in her last months when she knew she was running out of time. Hank's eyes found Elena in the gallery. She talked about Elena constantly. She had been watching over her for 10 years, tracking her life through photographs and updates I gathered during trips to New York. A murmur ran through the courtroom. She knew what Elena's family had done to her. She knew because they had done the same thing to Maggie 70 years before. And she was determined that Elena would have the chance she had fought for herself, the chance to build something from the ashes of rejection. Walter nodded. Did Mrs. Holloway express any concerns about other family members? She knew Derek and Vanessa would come. Hank's gaze shifted to the petitioner's table, his expression hardening. They showed up in 2019 pretending to be concerned relatives, trying to have her declared incompetent so they could seize control of her assets. She saw through them immediately. She hired investigators, documented their history of fraud and manipulation. She said that when she died, they would try again, and Elena needed weapons to fight back. And did she leave such weapons? Hank reached into his jacket and produced a USB drive. 2 months before she died, Maggie recorded a video. She gave it to me with instructions to present it only if her will was challenged. I believe this qualifies. The courtroom's video system flickered to life, and suddenly Maggie Holloway was present among them. She sat in the library Elena now knew so well, thinner than the photograph suggested, her face marked by the illness that was stealing her remaining days. But her eyes still held the fierce intelligence that had built an empire from exile. "My name is Margaret Holloway," the recording began, "and I am making this video on March 15th, 2024. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. My doctors give me weeks, possibly days. And I am making this recording because I know with absolute certainty that after I die, Derek and Vanessa Reyes will try to steal what I am leaving behind." She paused, gathering strength for what came next. "They tried once before in 2019. They came to my home with lawyers and false concern, hoping to convince a court that I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. They failed because I had better lawyers and decades of experience dealing with predators in business. But I knew they would not give up. Greed never surrenders. It only waits for better opportunities." The camera held steady on her face, capturing every word with documentary clarity. "So let me make my wishes absolutely clear. I am leaving everything I own to Elena Reyes. Not because she asked for it. She has no idea this inheritance exists. Not because I owe her anything. We have met exactly once in her entire life. I am leaving it to her because I have watched her for 10 years, through photographs and reports and the careful observation of a man I trust with my life. I have seen her work 3 jobs to feed her daughter. I have seen her give tips she cannot afford to workers poorer than herself. I have seen her maintain dignity and kindness in circumstances that would break most people." Maggie leaned forward, her intensity cutting through the screen. "She is what I was before success gave me weapons to fight back. She deserves those weapons now, and I will be damned if I let Derek and Vanessa take them from her grip." She straightened, composing herself. "If you are watching this, it means they challenged my will. It means they are trying to take what does not belong to them. So let me tell you what I know about them." What followed was devastating. Maggie laid out the investigation files in precise detail. The insider trading, the client fraud, the forged documents. She named dates, amounts, accomplices. She explained how Derek had bribed a nurse to obtain medical records he hoped to use against her in the 20th incompetency hearing. She described Vanessa's scheme to inflate invoices for a renovation project, bilking a client of over $200,000. "These are not confused relatives fighting for what they deserve," Maggie concluded. "These are parasites who have spent their entire adult lives taking from others. They contribute nothing. They build nothing. They only consume and move on to the next victim." Her voice softened then, losing its prosecutorial edge. "Elena, if you are watching this, know that I love you. I have loved you from the moment I saw your photograph, a young woman holding her newborn daughter with such desperate hope in her eyes. I saw myself in that image. I saw what I might have been if someone had helped me when I needed it most." Tears were streaming down Elena's face now, matched by many in the gallery. "I could not be there for you in person. My health, my distance, the tangled history between our family, it all kept me away when I wanted so desperately to reach out. But I am here for you now in the only way left to me. Take what I have built, use it to become what they said you could never be, and know that somewhere, somehow, I am watching, and I am so proud of what you will accomplish." The screen went dark. Judge Fletcher sat in silence for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to the petitioner's table, where Derek and Vanessa sat ashen-faced, their attorneys in disarray. "Mr. Thompson, do your clients wish to respond to the evidence presented?" Thompson rose, but his earlier confidence had evaporated. "Your Honor, we need time to review these allegations. Much of this material was not disclosed during discovery." Because it did not need to be, Walter interjected. The documents were sealed per Mrs. Holloway's instructions to be opened only if the will was contested. Your clients triggered their own destruction. Fletcher raised a hand for silence. I have heard enough. The petition to freeze assets is denied. The petition to contest the will is denied. Margaret Holloway's final wishes, as documented in her properly executed will be carried out as written. She fixed Derek and Vanessa with a look that could have cut glass. Furthermore, I am referring the forged sales contract to the district attorney for criminal investigation. I am also forwarding Mrs. Holloway's investigation files, including her recorded testimony, to both state and federal authorities for review of potential securities fraud and elder abuse charges. Derek stood abruptly. This is outrageous. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Fletcher cut him off. I strongly suggest you exercise it before you make your situation worse. She gathered her papers. Court is adjourned. In the chaos that followed, Derek pushed through the crowd toward Elena, his face contorted with rage that had finally broken through its polished surface. You think this is over? We will appeal. We will file in federal court. We will... Sheriff Bradley materialized between them, his hand resting casually on the cuffs at his belt. Mr. Reyes, you heard the judge. I suggest you leave this building before I find a reason to escort you out in a less comfortable fashion. Derek's jaw worked silently. Years of privilege warring with the reality of a situation he could not buy or bluff his way out of. Finally, he stepped back, but his eyes never left Elena's face. This family has not forgotten what you did. Walking away from everything we offered, choosing that worthless man over people who could have helped you. And now you steal from us again. Elena met his gaze without flinching. The woman who had sat terrified in that Manhattan conference room 3 months ago was gone, replaced by someone forged in fire. I did not steal anything, Derek. I survived. Just like Maggie survived. Just like our grandmother, or mother, or whatever Eleanor was to her, should have been allowed to know the truth and survive it too. She stepped closer, her voice low but carrying clearly in the hushed courtroom. You want to know what Maggie taught me? That family is not about blood. It is about who shows up when everything falls apart. And you never showed up for anyone but yourselves. Vanessa grabbed Derek's arm, pulling him toward the exit. We are leaving. Now. They retreated through the crowd, their expensive attorneys trailing behind, their empire of greed crumbling around them. At the door, Derek turned back one last time. You will regret this. Elena's response was quiet but absolute. No, I really will not. Outside the courthouse, snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting down through gray air. The people of Silver Creek gathered around Elena with handshakes and embraces, their faces bright with victory and relief. Rosa Chen was crying. Pete Morrison kept shaking his head in wonder. Hank stood slightly apart, watching the scene with the quiet satisfaction of a promise kept. Walter Morrison approached Elena with a manila folder. There are some documents you need to sign to complete the transfer of assets. We can handle them tomorrow when things have settled. He paused, his weathered face softening. Maggie would be proud of you today. I did not do anything. She planned all of this. She planned for you to be brave enough to see it through. That part was yours. A year passed. Spring melted into summer. Summer blazed into autumn. Autumn quieted into winter again. The mansion transformed under Elena's care, not through expensive renovation, but through patient attention. Fresh paint in rooms that needed it. Repairs to systems that had been neglected. Gardens cleared and prepared for future blooming. The Margaret Holloway Foundation launched with a $100 million endowment and a mission statement Elena wrote herself, to help single mothers rebuild their lives through housing, job training, childcare, and small business loans. Applications flooded in from across New England, each one a story of struggle that Elena recognized because she had lived it. The mansion's ground floor became a community center, just as she had imagined during those first dark nights when the future seemed impossible to see. The library opened to the public, its thousands of volumes now accessible to anyone who wanted to discover new worlds through words. The art studio hosted classes led by local artists who had never before had a proper space to teach. Lily flourished in her new school, making friends and discovering a talent for writing that her teachers encouraged and Elena nurtured. She led storytelling sessions in the library on Saturday mornings, her audience of younger children hanging on every word as she spun tales of adventure and courage. Hank remained a constant presence, though their relationship had evolved beyond mentor and student. He had begun to smile more often, the grief that had shadowed him slowly lifting in the warmth of purpose renewed. His son Tommy had called it Christmas, the first contact in over a decade. The conversations were awkward and halting, wounds too deep to heal quickly, but they were talking. That was something. One evening in early March, a year almost to the day since the trial, Elena received a letter that bore no return address. Elena, I know I have no right to write to you. I know you owe me nothing, not consideration, not response, not the time it takes to read these words. But I am writing anyway because I have nowhere else to turn. The investigation that started after the trial has expanded. Federal prosecutors have taken an interest in my business dealings, and my lawyers tell me that indictment is likely within months. Vanessa has already cut a deal, trading testimony against me for reduced charges. Our mother refuses to speak with either of us. Our father, before he died, told me I had brought shame on the family name. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve it and would not believe you if you offered it. I am writing because Maggie's investigation files contain evidence that goes beyond the trial. Things I did years ago before any of this started. If those files become public, or if you share them with prosecutors, I will not just lose my career. I will go to prison for a very long time. I have 2 children now, Elena, a boy who is 5 and a girl who is 3. They do not know what their father has done. They only know that daddy is scared and angry and that everything is falling apart. I am not asking you to hide what I did. I am asking you not to actively help them destroy me. Let the system work on its own. Let them find what they find without your assistance. Give my children a chance to grow up without their father being led away in handcuffs on the evening news. This is not about me anymore. It stopped being about me the moment I understood what I had become. Derek Elena sat with the letter for a long time, watching snow fall past the library windows while the fire crackled in the hearth. Lily had gone to bed an hour ago, her reading light finally dark, her breathing settled into the steady rhythm of peaceful sleep. 2 children, 5 and 3, young enough that their memories of this time might fade or old enough that they would carry the images forever. She thought about Maggie, who had been denied the right to raise her own daughter, who had watched from a distance as her child grew up believing a lie. She thought about Eleanor, who had died never knowing the truth about her own birth. She thought about the cycles of pain that families inflicted on each other, generation after generation, each wound creating the conditions for the next. And she thought about herself at Lily's age, watching her parents fight, sensing the fractures that would eventually shatter everything. The next morning, she wrote her response. Derek, I will not give Maggie's files to the prosecutors. I will not destroy them either. They will remain in the vault where she kept them, untouched unless circumstances force me to act otherwise. But do not mistake this for forgiveness. I am not forgiving you. What you did to me, to Lily, to Maggie, was calculated cruelty designed to strip us of everything and leave us with nothing. You looked at a struggling single mother and her child and saw only obstacles between yourself all and money you did not earn or deserve. I am doing this for your children, for the 5-year-old and the 3-year-old who had no say in who their father would be. They did not choose you. They should not be punished for your choices. I hope, for their sake, that you find a way to become someone worthy of them. I hope you spend whatever time you have left teaching them that the measure of a person is not what they take, but what they give. But I will not be part of your life, and you will not be part of mine. Do not contact me again. Elena. She sealed the envelope and mailed it without allowing herself second thoughts. Some doors, once closed, needed to stay that way. The second anniversary of her arrival in Silver Creek dawned cold and clear, winter releasing its grip just enough to hint at the spring to come. Elena stood in the vault room, now converted to a children's reading center, watching Lily lead a writing workshop for a dozen local kids who hung on her every word. The massive safe stood open and empty, its contents long since distributed or invested or transformed into programs that changed lives. But on its back wall, Elena had hung a framed copy of Maggie's original inventory, with her own edition written below in careful script. $265 million received and transformed. 1,847 families helped to find stability. 412 scholarships funded. 127 jobs created, hope built where none existed. Balance remaining. Enough. More than enough. Thank you, Maggie, for seeing me when my own family could not. Hank appeared in the doorway, his weathered face creased with a smile that had become more frequent over the past 2 years. Behind him, Rosa Chen carried a cake decorated with candles, and Pete Morrison followed with his wife and their teenage son, who was home from the college that Maggie's foundation had helped him attend. Happy anniversary, Rosa announced, setting the cake on a table as the children gathered around with excitement. Elena looked at the faces surrounding her, the mentor who had become family, the community that had become home, the daughter who had become her greatest purpose. 2 years ago, she had been a woman with nothing, sitting in a Manhattan law office while her own blood declared her worthless. Now she stood in a house built by someone who had understood that true wealth was not measured in dollars, but in the lives you touched, the hope you created, the legacy you chose to leave behind. Lily tugged at her hand. Mommy, I make a wish. Elena bent toward the candles, their flames dancing in the drafts of an old house full of new purpose. She did not need to wish for anything. Everything she had ever wanted was already here, in this room, in this moment, in the eyes of a child who would never know what it meant to be abandoned. But she made a wish anyway, not for herself. For all the women out there still fighting, still surviving, still waiting for someone to see their worth. May they find their Silver Creek, she thought. May they find their Maggie. May they build something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to destroy them. She blew out the candles and the room erupted in applause. Outside the window, snow was beginning to melt. Spring was coming, and the story was only beginning.